Okay, we are recording, so if anybody misses this, they could watch at a later date. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rachel with Salt and Blue, and today we have a special guest here, Captain Paul Watson, and we will be talking to him all about his organization, his life in this world. I'm going to introduce him. I was reading his bio, and I was like, all of this actually needs to be said because it's pretty profound. Captain Paul Watson is a marine wildlife conservationist, environmental activist, master mariner, acclaimed author, and renowned public speaker whose life has been dedicated to defending the world's oceans. He was one of the founding members and directors of Greenpeace before leaving the organization in 1977 to establish the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, an organization he led for decades before resigning in 2022 to co-found the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. Throughout his lifelong commitment to marine conservation, Captain Watson has become one of the most recognized figures in environmental activism, earning numerous international honors and awards. In 1998, he received the Genesis Award for Lifetime Achievement. In 2000, Time magazine named him one of the top 20 environmental heroes of the 20th century. And in 2002, he was inducted into the U.S. Animal Rights Hall of Fame in Washington, D.C. In 2007, he was awarded the Amazon Peace Prize by the President of Ecuador. In 2012, Captain Watson became only the second person, after Captain Jacques Cousteau, to receive the prestigious Jules Verne Award honoring environmentalists and adventurers. Today, through the Captain Paul Watson Foundation, Captain Watson continues his unwavering fight to protect marine wildlife and defend the oceans for future generations. So welcome. Great to
Okay.
have you. Yeah. And then I also want to mention to everyone the reason we're doing this is because we just launched on Salt and Blue a donation feature to support different organizations. And right now, I think through the whole year, we are featuring the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. So any purchase you make, you have an option to donate to this organization. So Paul, without further ado, welcome. I'd love to just introduce you the way you would. Can you give us like a brief overview of what inspires you? What sparked you to dive into this work?
Well, it's a, a long story. I began doing this when I was 11 years old because I was raised in an Eastern Canadian fishing village, and I spent an entire summer when I was 10 swimming with a family of beavers. And the next year, I was eager to get back and see the beavers again, but I found out they were all gone, and trappers had taken them out during the winter. So that made me quite angry. So I began to walk the trap lines that winter and free the animals and destroy the traps. So I guess I've been doing the same thing for the last 60 years, really. But when I was 19, I was the youngest founding member of a group called the Don't Wave a Wave Committee. It was in response to nuclear testing in the Aleutian Islands. And at one of the early meetings, somebody said left and went peace, and somebody else said make it a Greenpeace. And Bob Hunter said, "Hey, great name for the boat." So the Greenpeace boat was the one that sailed up to Amchitka. And when we came back, we established the Greenpeace Foundation, changing the name. And I was with Greenpeace Foundation for 7 years, and then I was the campaign leader on the SEAL operations, and I came to a point where a sealer is about to kill a baby seal, and so I rushed forward, grabbed the club out of his hand, threw it in the ocean, and picked up the seal and saved it, took it to safety. But the Greenpeace board said they accused me of theft and vandalism. I stole the man's property and destroyed it. And I said, well, if I had to do the same thing, I'd do the same thing over again. So I resigned from Greenpeace to set up Sea Shepherd with the strategy of aggressive nonviolence. And what that means is to aggressively intervene, but without causing any injury. And over the last 50 years, we've never caused a single injury to anybody. We've never actually been convicted of a felony crime, and we've never been successfully sued. But we have shut down, hundreds of illegal operations involving the killing of whales or seals, fish, seabirds, and other destructive issues that are affecting ocean ecosystems.
Amazing. I love it. I remember, so the reason I'm pretty just when we were talking about nonprofits to support, I was like, we have to find Paul Watson because I remember my brother was living on the San Juan Islands and he was painting a ship or something. I don't know what he was doing with your organization, but he would tell me about you all the time and what you did and how you actually did the work and went out there and put yourself on the line to protect these animals. And I thought it was so remarkable. So just thank you for what you're doing and all that you've done. I think it's incredible. And if somebody hasn't heard of you, this is a perfect time to learn a little bit more. Um, can you share a little bit about what you've done? I mean, let's back up. Let's talk about Sea Shepherd and how that changed. Because when I first heard that it's no longer Sea Shepherd and it's Paul Watson Foundation, I was just like so confused. I was like, what happened? So if somebody's used to hearing Sea Shepherd or familiar with that word, can you tell us a little bit about that change?
Well, I built the Sea Shepherd movement up over 50 years, really. And I set it up as a movement, not as an organization. So all of the various countries are independent entities, all working together towards a common goal. But in 2022, there was a coup, really, where four individuals decided that they were going to take over the whole thing. And they illegally dismissed me. And they seized the ships, they seized the assets, they seized the archives. And I think that was a result because we had a very successful television show, Whale Wars, and that gave us a lot of support. And I've always felt that the larger an organization becomes, the least effective it becomes. And so we got to the point where I was then confronted with this accusation that I was too controversial and too confrontational, and that it was a threat to their big donor, as they said, and therefore they wanted to be go more mainstream. And I said, well, we have plenty of mainstream organizations. The unique thing about Sea Shepherd is we're the only one that's not mainstream. We go out and directly confront the people who are causing the problems. But they took it over. But fortunately, Sea Shepherd France, Sea Shepherd Brazil, and Sea Shepherd UK remain loyal to those principles. So we still work with them, but we're not allowed to use the Sea Shepherd name, the name I created, the logos I designed, because they covertly copyrighted them and they own what I created. So I had to set up the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. I actually set it up as Captain Paul Watson Foundation because I said, at least they can't take my name.
Yeah.
Actually, they tried to sue me to take my name, saying it was causing confusion amongst their supporters. But anyway, I've always felt that, you have to accept these situations and then move on and rebuild or whatever it is. And that's what we've done. And we now have two large ships that are one's in France right now, the other one's just leaving Brazil to go to Iceland. And we've done campaigns over the last few years under a different name.
Oh, amazing. I love that. And thank you for continuing to fight the way that you do. So if somebody were to donate to your organization through our platform, what could they expect and look forward to supporting? What kind of activities do you have going on right now?
Well, just in the last few months, our last campaign was to go to the Southern Ocean and disrupt the krill fishery. And we focused on the Norwegian vessels. There's two giant factory ships down there taking krill. Now, these are small zooplankton, very shrimp-like creatures, but they are the primary food of the whales and the penguins of the Southern Ocean. And last year, they took 650,000 metric tons, and they wanted to double that to 1.2 million metric tons. Now, they're catching the krill for the specific purpose of feeding to farm-raised salmon on salmon farms around the world, which is primarily a Norwegian industry. And that's why salmon is everywhere. It's very cheap because they're mass producing it on these huge industrial farms. But to raise salmon, you have to feed them. And the average to raise one salmon on a salmon farm usually takes about 70 fish, which
Mm.
is with all other additives. But so finding krill, because they're running low on the amounts of small fishes that they can exploit to feed to the salmon, they decided to go to krill and turn that into a cheap protein paste for salmon food. And so they're really destroying the Antarctic ecosystem for that purpose. So many organizations have gone down there, Greenpeace, National Geographic, and when they videotape it, they photograph it, they expose it, but nobody does anything.
Yeah.
It goes to the converted really. So I decided that, well, we have to get people's attention on this. And so I sent the vessel, the Bandero, down there, and I said, now go in. I don't want you to ram the ship, but go in slowly and touch it, just like the Native Americans used to say, counting coup, touch the enemy. So they touched the boat, didn't cause any damage, but it was a very dramatic photograph. And that photograph, of course, went worldwide. And it was actually helped by the Norwegian crew and the company because they immediately accused us of being pirates and eco-terrorists and putting their lives in danger and we're a threat to everything, which is what we thought that they would do, which was great because that guaranteed us the media coverage that we wanted. And so the practical result of that is that 3 weeks after that campaign, the European Parliament has proposed a motion to have a 5-year moratorium on the krill fishery. So if you want to get political action, you actually have to get the attention in the media to get people aware of what's happening. And that ship, the Bandero, has now in Brazil, and it'll be leaving in a couple of days to go to Iceland because Iceland wants to kill 118 endangered fin whales this summer. And that's completely illegal. It's a violation of the International Whaling Commission's moratorium on commercial whaling, and it's an endangered species. Now, the problem with international laws and regulations and treaties, and we have plenty of them, is they're meaningless because of no enforcement. There's a complete lack of economic and political motivation to uphold international conservation law. So we have to do that. And the reason we've been able to get away with it is because we're opposing these illegal activities. In 1986, I sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet dockside. I sent 2 of those ships to the bottom and destroyed their whale processing plant. Now, that might sound illegal, but it wasn't because we're never charged. I even flew to Iceland to demand to be arrested for doing that. And I was met at the airport by the immigration people and about 20 police officers. And they said, "How long do you intend to stay in Iceland?" I said, "I don't know, 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 years, you tell me." They said, "Well, we have to go for interrogation." I said, "Well, that sounds like fun." So we went to interrogation. They said, "Are you admitting to sinking these ships?" I said, "You know, we sunk them. We're going to sink the other 2 at the first opportunity." And so they put me in a police car, drove me to the airport, told me to go home. And the minister of the attorney general of Iceland said, "Who does he think he is? He comes into our country and demands to be arrested. Get him out of here." The reason being is they knew that to put me on trial would be to put Iceland on trial for
Mhm.
their illegal activities. So the problem is corporations and governments are breaking laws all the time. And, you know, our campaign against the krill fishery just 2 months ago, the Norwegian says, "We're going to sue them." They're not going to sue me. Or they're going to have us charged. They're not going to have us charged because they don't want the publicity on that.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Wow. And how long, so like when you guys went to with the krill fishery, how long were you guys at sea?
That was about a 2 months because we had to cross from Australia across the Pacific to the Southern Ocean and by Chile and then come back through to Brazil. So it was a long voyage. The actual intervention was only about 10 days.
Okay. And how long do you think you'll be out for the fin whales coming
Well,
up?
we could shut it down in a week, or it could take two
Yeah.
months. What
Okay.
we're doing is blocking their operations. They might give up. Well, here's what happened in June of 2023 when we arrived off the coast of Iceland. The very day we arrived, they canceled the whale hunt. The next year was we set out to leave from Ireland to go to Iceland. As soon as our ship left, they canceled the whale hunt again. And in 2025, they did the same thing. So
They
the
know
last
you're coming.
Yeah, so the last 3 years there have been no whales killed. Now they could do that again, but I think that Christian Lofson, who owns the whaling fleet, is adamant about going out and doing it this year. Now it doesn't make any sense because there's no market for whale meat.
Mhm.
You've got a place to sell it. But Christian Lofson is the wealthiest and most influential person in Iceland, and whaling is a hobby. He likes to kill whales, and he hasn't made any money on it for 25 years, but he wants to kill whales. He's 83 years old, and he's very stubborn, and that's what he wants to do. So I think that if we stop him this year, we
Yeah.
will actually shut it down permanently. Our other ship, the John Paul de Joria, will be going to the Faroe Islands, where they kill dolphins and pilot whales every year. And we'll be taking media with us and to interfere with what's going on there. They just passed a law in the Faroe Islands exempting the killing of dolphins and whales from the Animal Welfare Act of the Faroe Islands.
Why is
So
that?
well, because well, they know what they're doing is extremely cruel and is visibly cruel. But the Animal Welfare Act says you can't abuse animals.
Mhm.
And so, it applies to dogs, cats, horses, whatever, and should apply to them. But they passed a motion unanimous in the parliament that the Grindadrap, as it's called, which literally translates to the murder of whales. The Grindadrap is exempt from the Animal Welfare Act, and therefore they can do whatever they want. It's interesting because they never really arrested anybody under it before, but a few years ago, my crew was arrested for animal cruelty because we interfered with them killing the whales. And because we had the boats in the water to block them from getting to the dolphins and the whales to kill them, they said we caused trauma and harassment to the whales and the dolphins, and therefore inflicting, cruelty on them. And I'm
Wow.
s- and our argument was there's a dozen boats there trying to kill them. Yes, but they're exempt from the regulation. You're not. We have to deal with that all the time. I mean, in Canada, for instance, where they kill seals,
Mhm.
uh, I've been fighting that all. Finally, we shut it down, but the commercial part of it anyway. I remember in 1977 when we first went out there, or what happened is they passed a special law, and the law is called the Seal Protection Act. The only people who have ever been arrested under the Seal Protection Act are animal welfare people, conservationists, and reporters and filmmakers. The SEAL Protection Act says it's a violation of the SEAL Protection Act to approach within a half a nautical mile of a seal hunt. It's a violation to film or photograph a seal hunt. So if you've witnessed it, you've just broken the law. But no sealers are ever arrested under it. It's just an Orwellian thing. If you're going to pass a law to protect the industry, let's call it a law to protect the species that they're killing.
Yeah.
And the only people, like I said, have been arrested are us. I was actually charged in 1983 with conspiracy to break the Seal Protection Act and breaking the Seal Protection Act. And I knew we were going to be found guilty. So we did something rather unique. I had 20 crew members, and we were all going to be found guilty because we were brought before who we call the hanging judge of the seal hunt, a judge named Yvonne Mercier in Quebec. And I said, okay, we're not going to win this. So here's what the tactic is. I told all my crew members, make him angry. Make that judge angry every single day we're in front of him. Just piss him off. And that's what we did. And he was so angry that he threw the book at us. So I got 15 months in prison for conspiracy to break the Seal Protection Act, 6 months for breaking it, 21 months in prison for the SEAL Protection Act. My chief engineer got 8 months. My crew got fined big fines. My ship was confiscated, and I was fined $75,000. And I was told I was not allowed to speak to any reporter anywhere in the world for 3 years after that. That is exactly what I wanted him to do because we then turned that around, went to the Quebec Court of Appeals and said, what is this nonsense? And the Quebec Court of Appeals said, yeah, they just threw the whole thing out because the judge was so over the top biased.
Wow. So what ended up happening? Threw the whole thing out? Nothing.
Well, all the charges were dropped again.
Yeah. Wow.
And what happened in 1985, we ended the white coat pup, the newborn pups that were killed. We ended that, put an end to that. And in 2008, we put an end to the market in Europe for seal products, banning those products from Canada. It was a long fight, but it was a successful fight. Now they still kill seals in Canada, about 40,000, but the actual quota is 450,000. But the actual why they kill them is the Canadian government subsidizes the kill to $20 million a year just to keep these people so they can have a job for a month once a year. So it qualifies them for unemployment insurance. It's a very political thing.
Wow. Wild. Somebody wrote in the comments that you are an angel in human form. I just wanted to share that with you.
I usually get called pirate or terrorist. When people call me an eco-terrorist, my response is I've never worked for Monsanto. So,
Yeah. Perfect. What has been the most, I guess, exciting, or you shared a lot of stories just now, but what has been the best activity or push that you've done in like all of your time?
well, there's been so many, it's hard to say. I would probably one of the most exciting campaigns was 1981 when we invaded the Soviet Union. And the reason we did that was that we knew the Soviets were killing whales for the purpose of feeding to mink and sable and fox on farms. But they were supposed to be a whale hunt for indigenous peoples. But we knew that wasn't the case because the quota had gone so high and there weren't that many people that it would support.
Mm.
But they refused to allow the International Whaling Commission people to go in and observe it. So I said, okay, well, we'll just go in and observe it ourselves. So we landed on the coast of Siberia in August of 1981. And we were the first people to invade the Soviet Union since World War II. And what happened is, as we approached the shore, I saw two Red Army soldiers patrolling the beach. We got out of the boat with our cameras and we filmed everything for 45 minutes while these two soldiers walked around. And the reason they did that is we had to have been Russians. Who else would be on that beach photographing things because they weren't expecting an invasion, real one. So we filmed everything. And then I went back, and our two photographers got in the boat. And as I was pushing the boat out, this one soldier came. He's only about 18, a very young guy, and he comes over and he points at our boat and he says, "Stoyet, what is that?" And I said, it's a Zodiac. It's a Zodiac." And he looked at the outboard motor. He said, "Yeah, Mercury, American." And I turned my back to him and began to push the boat out. And I said to the two guys in the boat, "What's he doing?" He says, "He's taking his rifle down." I said, "Laugh and wave and smile." And that's what they did. The psychology being, you're not going to shoot you if they're loud because they don't know who you are really. So
Yeah.
we got back to the ship fine, and we're patrolling down the coast when about an hour later, two helicopter gunships came out of nowhere, big red stars on the side, and they started firing flares in front of us. And I said to the crew, "Let's just ignore them and carry on." And then about an hour after that, a huge Soviet frigate comes alongside, pulls up alongside, pulls the tarps off their guns, getting ready, and they're threatening us, putting up flags, stop the ship. And then finally, the captain gets on the radio. I don't know why I didn't think of this in the first place, but after all the flags and everything, but he gets on the radio and says, "Sea shepherd, stop your ship and prepare to be boarded by the Soviet Union." And I got on the phone and I said, "Captain, we don't have room for the Soviet Union. We're not stopping." And he didn't know what to do because I learned a long time ago when you're dealing with navies, they don't know how to deal with no. They're used to intimidation. And if you're not intimidated, they're really at a loss. And I could just see this guy's probably on the radio to Moscow saying, "What the hell am I supposed to do here? I mean, do I shoot at him? Do I what?" And the chase, after about an hour chase, we had crossed into the US side and they had to pull away. But
Wow.
we've had confrontations with the Norwegian Navy, the Canadian Coast Guard, the Portuguese Navy, the Danish Navy, and that the Norwegians were actually the most dangerous because we were out there to disrupt their whaling, and this warship comes along, and the captain says, "I have it from the highest authority in Norway to do whatever it takes to stop you." I said, "Okay, we'll do whatever it takes because we're not stopping." He fired a shot over top of us. He fired a shot in front of us. He dropped four depth charges underneath of us, and we still didn't stop, so he rammed us. That was a bit of a mistake on his part because he caused significant damage to our bow, but it ripped open the side of his ship for about 40 meters, caused an incredible amount of damage to himself. And then he chased us for 500 miles all the way to the Shetland Islands, but he wasn't able to get us.
Wow. I love that. And now, how many crew members or how many people do you have working with your foundation?
Well, we have a lot of volunteers. We only have a very small staff. The crew are, again, primarily volunteers. So the ship can have between 25 or 35, depending on the campaign.
Okay, yeah, I know we just sent a bunch of sunscreen over, I think, to your crew in Ireland that's leaving soon. But
They
how
can
does some go
they can
ahead?
use they can use it in Brazil, Ireland, a little.
What? Hopefully there'll
But,
be lots of sun.
but no, the summer in the Arctic is when the sun is a problem.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. So I just like I can imagine these people getting involved and being so passionate and like, can you speak a little bit to the people that come into your organization and how long they're there and just anything you want to share about them?
Well, I would say since I began, about 7,000 volunteers have participated on that. And they come from all different countries, all different walks of life and backgrounds. And it's people who want to get actively involved. Some stay for a couple of weeks, some stay for a couple of years. It really depends on that. And then some stay forever, like Lamia Samlami. She first came in 2005 from Paris, and she went back and started Sea Shepherd France. And that's 20 years later, she's still doing that. So, I think it's profoundly changes a lot of people because they realize that they can make a difference. I've always said there's three things that change the world: passion, courage, and imagination, and individuals who exercise those three virtues. That's what changes the world. And when you take a look at the history of social revolutions and the history of the humanity, that's what's always solved problems. Governments don't change things. People change things. They motivate governments. Women didn't get the right to vote because of government. Woodrow Wilson opposed them all the way, but he gets credit for it. But it was the thousands of women who took to the streets and got beaten and went to jail. That's what made it. Slavery was ended by people like Wilberforce and Douglas, and then you look at the work of Jane Goodall and Diana Fossey. We still have mountain gorillas because of Diana Fossey. There's so many species that have been saved from extinction because of the passionate intervention of dedicated people.
Yeah, I love that. No, and if you've ever watched to our customers out there, if you've ever watched I was watching something on Netflix, maybe it was Seaspiracy, I can't remember. But just watching what you guys do, knowing that you support it, you feel like you're there too, and you feel like so excited and impactful yourself just by merely supporting this organization. So just as a reminder, everyone, this is now available on our shop page. You can see a little option to donate to the Captain Paul Watson Foundation if you would like to check out their website as well, if you would like to check out more about them. Okay, this is great. What other things are happening in the next, like, do you have any plans for the next 5 years, or how do you start to pinpoint what you're going to do? And are some things spur of the moment?
Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of issues that I wish there weren't so many issues. But diminishment of biodiversity in our ocean is escalating, and there's fewer and fewer of everything every year. Every single commercial fishery is in a state of collapse, economic collapse. So there's less and less fish. Since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton. Phytoplankton provides 70% of the oxygen in the air we breathe. And the reason for this diminishment is because of the diminishment of whales and other species like that, because they provide the nutrients that the phytoplankton needs. The whales are literally the farmers of the ocean, and they're fertilizing these vast crops of phytoplankton with magnesium, iron, and nitrogen, and that comes from the feces of these whales. One blue whale drops 3 tons a day, and that floats on the surface, providing the nutrient base for the phytoplankton. Everything in the ocean is interconnected. Everything supports everything else. I've always pushed the idea and try to get people to understand that no species lives on this planet unless they live within accordance to the three basic laws of ecology. Diversity, the strength of an ecosystem is in diversity. Interdependence, that all species within an ecosystem are interdependent. And the third is the law of finite resources. There's a limit to growth because there's a limit to carrying capacity. And when we steal the carrying capacity from other species, that causes diminishment in both diversity and interdependence. That leads to ecological collapse. And so it's a major problem. If phytoplankton were to disappear from the ocean, we would die. We cannot live on this planet without phytoplankton. And the other 30% comes from trees, and we're cutting them down pretty fast too. So, this is about protecting the planet from our greed, really.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I wanted to touch or hear a little bit from you on your garbage or waste collection and plastic collection. I saw something on your site how, let me go to it really quick. And just to fill in our customers also, when we decided to start working with nonprofits, yes, we're a sunscreen brand and Salt and Blue is our thing. And it's about removing toxic chemicals from sunscreen so that it's not infiltrating coral, fish, mammals, things like that. And also creating something that isn't ending up in the ocean. So, not using plastic or bioplastic. But we're also supporting organizations who do work like what Paul Watson Foundation is doing and saving the animals or stop the krill fishery or the whaling, all of the different things. So it's all interconnected. But I was reading about something 72,000 pounds of trash collected. Do you have anything about that? Like, do you guys have crews out there regularly, or is that just something over the years you guys have done?
No, our chapters have beach cleanup operations around the world, but I think a lot of organizations do that. There's some that do more than others. We work very closely with Parley for the Oceans, and they try to do recycling and also finding alternatives for plastic. But when you're talking about sunscreen, it does make a difference because it's about 200 million people a day go into the ocean. So that's a lot of people. And if they're not using the right sunscreen, then that's going to get into the ecosystem, especially going to affect coral reefs and other things.
Yeah, no, it's pretty detrimental. Part of the reason, the only reason we launched Salt and Blue, we had a skincare line and we're like, this is good. But just diving a little bit deeper into oxybenzone and octinazate and avobenzone, all these filters and what they're doing, it was just kind of like, what are we doing? Like, we need a sunscreen company. We need to like really push this idea that you could have something that's beautiful and clean and gorgeous and it's not contaminating the ocean. So that's what prompted us to create Salt and Blue.
Hmm.
Thanks for that. If any of our customers have any questions, I'd be happy to ask them on your behalf. And anything else you want to share, something that somebody can do on a daily level, just to impact the ocean and what's happening.
Well, I think one of the problems we have is there's too many people eating too many fish. And all these all the fishing industry is in a state of collapse. And fish species are disappearing, and we just move on to something else. We adapt to that diminishment. That's one of the reasons there's so much salmon, because domestic salmon farms are replacing the wild po fish populations, which have been diminished. And but what people don't take into account is those domestic salmon eat a lot of fish. So it doesn't solve the problem at all.
That's a hard
So,
thing too, because I remember chatting with different nonprofits, and that's something I would ask, like, how deep do you guys get into commercial fishery? How deep do you get into kind of just like putting a halt on it? And nobody really talks about it. Nobody wants to touch on that subject.
well, in 2021, I was speaking at the United Nations Conference on Climate Change in Paris. And that's one of the things that got was very controversial about my speech, because I said we need a 75-year moratorium on industrialized commercial fishing. We have to shut it down.
Yeah.
The ocean needs to have the opportunity, the time to repair the damage that we've done to it, and it will repair the damage if we give it the time. The ocean's very resilient in that way. In the 20th century, there were two periods when fish populations began to revive, things began to repair. World War I, World War II. We were too busy killing each other to go fishing, and that's at the period when they started to revive. It doesn't take long, but we just have to give it the time. But unfortunately, there isn't really fishermen anymore. There's corporations. The corporations are in there for short-term investment, for short-term gain. So they don't really care about the future of a fishery. You know, it's companies that build, like for instance, the west coast of Canada, the entire fishing fleet's owned by a former used car salesman who looked at it as a good investment. Mitsubishi is one of the biggest suppliers of bluefin tuna. They don't care if it goes extinct. They'll just take that money and put it into something else. And you hear about the pirates of Somalia, those horrible Somali pirates. Why are they there? Because the real pirates, the Asian and European commercial fishing fleets, went down there and took everything and drove those people into poverty, forcing them into piracy. Nobody talks about that, actually. Or the Norwegian drag trawler fleet that went down the coast of India and put 1 million Indian fishermen out of work because they took everything. They go in and they just bottom trawlers, mid-water trawlers. Give you an idea, we shut down these toothfish poachers in the Southern Ocean. There were 6 vessels down there. They're all pirates, all completely illegal. And we went after them. And the first one was the most notorious that we found. It was called the Thunder. And as soon as we found that vessel off the coast of Antarctica, it dropped its net and it ran. And we chased that ship for 120 days. That was the longest pursuit of a poacher in maritime history. But that net that had dropped, our second ship, its job, pick that net up so it doesn't stay in the ocean. Our crew spent 200 hours pulling that net. It was 2 kilometers deep. It was 72 kilometers long, and it weighed 70 tons, one net from one ship. And there were 6 of those vessels doing that. And they were going after a fish called the Patagonia toothfish, which you never heard of because it's marketed as Chilean sea bass. It's not from Chile, it's not a bass, but that's a marketing term. And that's one of the most expensive fish on the planet, and it's endangered. And that's one of the reasons that it's expensive.
Wow. Yeah. I just remember seeing one of those movies, and it was talking about how it's maybe the length of like multiple football fields, the net itself, or like this drop, and it just pushes along the bottom floor of the ocean. So it's not really thinking about what it's catching. After watching that, me and my husband were just like, we can't eat fish. What do we do? And it's kind of like a hard pill to swallow when you're used to living a life a certain way,
Yeah.
um, to make that change, you know?
Yeah, those drag trawlers, they just scour the bottom and they destroy all the infrastructure down there, which is important for the fish to survive.
Yeah.
And they're just taking too much. In 1980s, I predicted that the northern cod population would collapse, and I was told, you don't know what you're talking about. We have the best scientists in the world. That's the Canadian government. And we have the best computer models. It won't happen. And then 1992, it collapsed. It's
Mm.
never recovered. It's never recovered. Now, why were those scientists working for the Canadian Department of Fisheries and Oceans saying that it was perfectly healthy? Because they're paid to say that. Any scientist who works for a government or for a corporation, I call them biostitutes. they say whatever they have to say in order to keep their job. I only trust scientists who work for universities who are independent agencies.
Nice. Yeah. No, that makes sense. What I feel like we've covered quite a bit, and just to give our viewers a little bit of hope and excitement about what they can expect, just, in the upcoming years or what changes could make positive impact, what would you want to share with them?
Over the last 50 years, we've been very successful in shutting down whaling. I would say we shut down 90% of whaling. Since we began, Australia, Chile, South Korea, South Africa, Soviet Union, Spain, all of these countries have stopped whaling. So only about 5% of the whaling is left, Iceland, Norway, and Japan. And I'm hoping that we'll shut that down permanently also. So it's been quite a success story in protecting whales, and many of the whale populations are coming back as a result of that.
That's
But I
huge.
also tell people, because people say, oh, it's very depressing, pessimistic about the future and everything. Never be pessimistic about the future, never be depressed. And the reason for this is you have no power over the future. Absolutely none. You don't know what the future is going to be, and you can't change it. But what you do have power over is the present. And what you do in the present will define what the future will be. So we focus on doing things now and to see what the results will be, but we're not going to get depressed over what's going to happen. And people say, well, what if there's an ecological collapse and everything? I said, the planet's not going anywhere. It's still be here. The five major extinction events over the course of the Earth's history, they all had one thing in common: 18 to 20 million years, full recovery. So no matter what we do, the 20 million years from now, it'll be a very beautiful planet here. We just won't be here. So I always say this is not about saving the planet. It's about saving ourselves from ourselves. And that we have to be aware of the damage that we're doing and try to rectify it.
I love that. Yeah. No, it's totally true. Making little choices in your everyday lives to make the impact and make the change. It's
Yeah.
great.
And for instance, our ships are vegan vessels. Everybody it has been for decades. And it's interesting because we don't preach veganism.
Hmm.
We by example. And it's amazing how many people come on. You don't have to be vegan to join the crew, but you have no choice. Once you're on the ship, you're a vegan. And so when we say they come on board, after about 2 weeks, they realize they didn't die. Oh, that's okay. After 2 months, they leave healthier than when they came on. And so that's been a very good learning experience for a lot of people, how, because it goes around all this propaganda where you always need this meat and fish in order to survive, and we don't. The problem is when I was born, there were 3 billion people on the planet. Now there's 8 billion people on the planet, and this planet is not meant for 8 billion meat-eating, fish-eating primates. I mean, we kill 110 billion animals on factory farms, and the amount of food that is has to be exploited to feed those 110 billion animals. We've turned the chicken into one of the largest aquatic predators on the planet because of the fish meal that it's fed.
Mm.
More fish are killed to feed chickens than most seabirds in the ocean.
I didn't know that.
And
Wow.
that's a world out of balance. It's a world that's an unnatural situation.
I feel like there's so many issues, so many things. And I know you shared your story of the beavers and how you got into the ocean aspect. Like, do you ever dive into issues on land? I mean, that would be a lot to handle, but
No, well, I have in the past. I spent 6 months investigating elephant poaching in '78. I led a campaign to stop the killing of wolves in the northern British Columbia, the Yukon area. I had a campaign to protect wood buffalo in Alberta. So I've been involved with those kind of other issues too. But at one point I just said, this is too much, so I have to focus on on doing.
yeah.
And also my education is in nautical with ships, and I was in the Merchant Marine, I was in the Coast Guard, so makes sense to do that.
Yeah, no, I can see that being a lot to take on. Just every issue you want to tackle. No, that's great. Okay, well, this was really insightful, and I really am so happy that I was able to connect with you and that we were able to, I don't know, just move forward with this. I was very excited. We talked to quite a few nonprofits, and I was like, we have to talk to Captain Paul Watson Foundation like
Okay.
that. I know it has nothing to do with plastic or with the actual chemicals, but it's everything to do with the ocean and the ecosystem, and it's all interconnected, as you said. So I think it's so important to support organizations like yours and yours specifically.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we will have more of these later on down as we dive into other nonprofits. But for now, it is the Captain Paul Watson Foundation that we are supporting. So please check them out. Check them out on their own page, paulwatsonfoundation.org, and also on our checkout. You can donate to them with every order.
Thanks. We're going to have a very active summer.
Okay. Yes. Amazing. Okay,
Thank you.
everyone, I'll stop recording. Okay, thank you so much. And if any other questions came through, I don't see any here. I'll pass them on to you and we can include those in our blog posts that we do.
Okay. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.